Dr. Mehler coming at you with more bad news. Uh, I'm introducing a new reading, George Fredrickson's Short History of Racism this week, and I wanted to say a few remarks about it. It's a wonderful book, and it represents the culmination of a great historian's career. He spent his entire life writing about racism, and then he wrote this really short book, Short History of Racism, in which he tried to describe the origins of racism in the modern world, its rise and fall. Because for Fredrickson, racism is not something that has existed forever, and it's not something that would exist forever. For him, it was a historical phenomenon that came into existence in the early modern period, from the late medieval to the early modern period, and began to collapse after World War II. And what I wanted to do is let me just share with you some pictures from the Renaissance. And these are pictures of Black people that you find in the Renaissance. And so that the first Africans that Europeans really got to meet were African traders. Now, Africa was far more advanced than Europe at a time when Europeans were agricultural and backward, and you had very little to trade. West Africa, North Africa rather, was a highly prosperous, advanced society. The first gold that was brought to England had a little elephant imprinted in it, was African gold. And if you take a look at this picture, look at this guy. I mean, there's nothing inferior about these people. They're just, here's the white guys and here's the Black guys, and he's got this really nice hat there, and he's well dressed. Here's an African. Nothing really inferior about him. He looks like he's really got his act together. These people were merchant princes. They were fabulously wealthy merchants who arrived in Europe on these ships from Africa that contained all kinds of Damascus steel, for example. I mean, beautifully carved instruments. The Africans had all kinds of things that the Europeans didn't have. And so when the Renaissance painters began to paint them, they were not at all depicted in any way as inferior. Here, this is one of the things that Fredrickson remarks on, is another example of how Europeans originally looked at Africans. This is this baby Jesus, and here are the three kings, and one of the three kings is the Magi, and this guy, and he's African king. He's Black. He looks like all the other kings. He is really always included in these nativity scenes. So the idea that Africans were seen as inferior is something that Fredrickson argues emerges later with the slave trade, not with the earliest interactions between Europeans and Africans. So the book is a concise history of the rise and fall of racism, right? He in the introduction, he has a few basic ideas that he wants to get across. One of them is that you have two kinds of racism: the racism of inclusion and the racism of exclusion. And racism of inclusion is that, for example, slavery. You have the Black people live right in your backyard. You own them and control them. They raise your children. They are your nannies. They breastfeed your children. I mean, it's not, you're not, it's completely racist, but they are part of your society. And then there's racism of exclusion, which is where you, for example, drive the Jews out of of England, France, Germany. They were, expelled from Spain in 1492, where you don't want to have anything to do with them, and you want to either drive them out or exterminate them. That's racism of exclusion. So he says that racism emerges from the late medieval period to the early modern period, and that what makes Western racism so interesting is that it developed in the context of a presumed human rights and of equality. All men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. But that was said by a slaveholder. And so you have a racist ideology developing simultaneously with a ideology of human rights, of equality and human rights. Fredrickson identifies three modern overtly racist states: the United States, Nazi Germany, and South Africa. The United States was an overtly racist state from the time it became a state in 1789 until at least 1954, when the Supreme Court in Brown versus the Board of Education said that that segregation was unconstitutional. So that's when he would draw the line at the beginning of the end of America, of the United States as an overtly racist state. So Nazi Germany lasts only from 1933 to 1945, so that's a 12-year reign. And South Africa is 1947 to 1994. Once again, a rather short period of survival. And both Nazi Germany and South Africa came under incredible attack. So the United States really stands out as the model of the overtly racist state. How do you define an overtly racist state? There's racism all in the West. I mean, Spain had racism, and Argentina, Nicaragua. I mean, all these countries, there was racism everywhere. So how do you distinguish what is special about the United States and its overtly racist state? So he said, first of all, there has to be an official ideology that's explicitly racist. That is, you have to have an official ideology that says that white people are superior to Black people. And this has to result in laws forbidding interracial marriage. And that, of course, happens all over the United States, where you're trying to protect the superior race, the white race, from pollution from the blood of the inferior race, the Black race. And so you have laws, and these laws were not declared unconstitutional, by the way, until Loving versus Virginia in 1967, I think it was. So that's so you could say that the United States really under this definition was an overtly racist state, at least until the Supreme Court said that laws forbidding interracial marriage were unconstitutional. Third, segregation is mandated by law. Under Jim Crow, this wasn't a matter of white people and Black people. Like if you go on campus and you go to the dining hall and you see the Black kids are sitting at one table and the white kids are sitting at another table, that's not mandated. That's not a law. That's not a campus rule. But under Jim Crow, the segregation was mandated by law. White people, and they had two drinking fountains, and white people can drink from one, and Black people can drink from the other. And if you drink from the wrong fountain, you can get arrested. So segregation is legally enforced. And to the extent that there's a franchise, a democratic franchise where everybody can vote, the Black population is excluded from that franchise. So that supposedly it's a democracy and everybody can vote, but under Jim Crow, 95% of people of African descent in the United States don't have access to voting. The overtly racist states have collapsed, according to Fredrickson, and the main reason is the collapse of colonialism after World War II. So that really the main reason for the collapse, what you have is before World War II, a world, Africa, Asia, China was not a country, independent country. All of Africa was controlled by white countries. They were colonies. China was not a free country. It was dominated by the West. India was a colony. India, this is the second largest country in the world, was a colony. It belonged to England, and England ruled over India. It was the jewel of the British Empire. The sun never set on the British Empire. It is the collapse of that control of the world, the global control that white people exerted over Asia and Africa and Latin America. It's the collapse of that control that leads to a devastating attack on racism by the ambassadors from these countries. You have a United Nations, you have a Cold War, and we desperately need these African nations and Asian nations to join the Western alliance, and Jim Crow becomes a really huge embarrassment. There is also, he says, just you can't underestimate the revulsion that occurred with the revelations of the Nazi atrocities. Fredrickson really says that Adolf Hitler gave racism a bad name. And if you think about this, the term racism becomes a term of opprobrium. It becomes a way to put somebody down. You're a racist. Only with Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. Before that, to say that you believe that people of African origins or the Negroes were inferior to white people wasn't a particularly controversial thing to say, and it wasn't. You weren't considered racist. You were just stating the obvious. So that's where Fredrickson begins. He's just a general introduction to the short history of racism. And I'll get back with a few remarks about chapter 1, perhaps later in the week. But I wanted to get you started and say a few words. You haven't heard from me in a bit, so that's an introduction to our new reading. We're going to have going to continue reading The Color of Law. We'll begin to read this short history of racism. And I will get back to you with more bad news before long. Bye-bye.